For more than 20 years, Vladimir Putin built a reputation that seemed unbreakable. He was the man who restored order after chaos, the leader who rebuilt Russia's military pride, the strategist who never lost control. At least that was the image. But history has a pattern. When authoritarian systems collapse, it rarely begins with protests or elections. It begins with war. Not a dramatic defeat, not a sudden overthrow, but slow erosion. And that is exactly what the war in Ukraine has done to Russia's military system. This is not just a story about tanks destroyed or territory gained or lost. It is about how a carefully constructed power structure is being tested and weakened from the inside. Because when an army fails, it is never just a military problem. It is a political one. For years, analysts avoided one uncomfortable question. What happens if Putin's army does not perform as promised? The assumption was simple. Russia might struggle, but it would adapt. It would overwhelm through numbers and firepower. Ukraine destroyed that assumption. Instead of a quick victory, Russia entered a grinding war of attrition. Instead of unity, fractures appeared. Instead of confidence, doubt spread. And slowly, quietly, a new question began circulating. Is this war breaking Russia and Putin's system from within? Before the invasion, Russia was widely described as the world's second most powerful military. On paper, the numbers were impressive. Thousands of tanks, one of the largest artillery forces on Earth, advanced missile systems, a nuclear arsenal capable of global destruction. Military parades reinforced this image. State television repeated it daily. But wars are not fought on paper. Ukraine revealed a fundamental truth. Russia had power, but not balance. Equipment, but not integration. Firepower, but not flexibility. And most importantly, it lacked an honest feedback system. Inside Russia's military hierarchy, bad news rarely traveled upward. Commanders exaggerated readiness. Training reports were inflated. Maintenance issues were hidden. Why? Because punishment was easier than reform. Officers learned that honesty ended careers. Optimism was rewarded. Reality was ignored. So when the invasion began, Russia did not encounter unexpected resistance. It collided with years of internal deception. Long before the first missile strike, Russia's military was already at war with itself. Corruption was not a side problem. It was structural. Money allocated for modernization disappeared. Equipment contracts were inflated. Spare parts were sold off. On paper, units were fully equipped. In reality, they were hollow. In peacetime, corruption hides behind bureaucracy. In wartime, it becomes lethal. Vehicles broke down. Communications failed. Supplies ran out faster than expected. Ukraine did not need to invent new weaknesses. Russia brought them to the battlefield. Russia's initial war plan assumed speed. Kyiv would fall quickly. The government would collapse. Resistance would fragment. This assumption shaped everything. Logistics were planned for days, not months. Troops carried parade uniforms, not winter gear. Supply chains were thin and exposed. When Ukraine resisted, the entire plan collapsed. And there was no plan B. Rigid command in a flexible war. Modern warfare rewards initiative. Russia's system punished it. Orders flowed downward. Information flowed upward, slowly and selectively. Junior officers lacked authority. Soldiers waited for instructions even under fire. Opportunities were missed because no one wanted responsibility. In contrast, Ukrainian units operated with flexibility. Local commanders adapted quickly. Decisions were made in minutes, not days. The result was asymmetry. Not in weapons, but in thinking. Russia has fought wars before. Chechnya, Georgia, Syria. But Ukraine was different. This was a high-intensity, near-peer conflict. Against an enemy with intelligence support, modern surveillance, precision weapons. Every weakness was exposed in real time. Every mistake was recorded. And unlike previous wars, this one could not be controlled through media alone. One of the most underestimated factors was drones. Ukraine used drones everywhere. Not just for attacks, but for surveillance, targeting, psychological pressure. Cheap drones provided constant visibility. Russian units could not hide. Movement became dangerous. Logistics were exposed. Air defenses were stretched thin. Electronic warfare was inconsistent. Every drone overhead increased stress. Fatigue turned into fear. Fear turned into mistakes. Wars are not won by frontline units alone. They are won by supply, fuel, food, ammunition, maintenance. Russia failed at protecting its logistics. Convoys were predictable. Routes were poorly secured. Coordination was weak. Ukraine understood this immediately. Instead of attacking tanks head-on, it attacked fuel trucks. And once fuel stopped flowing, everything stopped. Perhaps the clearest sign of dysfunction was the loss of high-ranking commanders. Russian generals were forced closer to the front, not to inspire, but to fix basic problems. Communications were unreliable. Junior leadership was weak. Coordination collapsed. Generals exposed themselves because the system beneath them could not function independently. This is extremely rare in modern warfare, and it came at a cost. Each loss weakened command cohesion further. Russia relied heavily on professional and elite formations, airborne troops, special units, contract soldiers. These forces were meant to lead decisive operations. Instead, they were thrown into prolonged, high-casualty combat. Losses were severe. When elite units are destroyed early, recovery becomes difficult. Replacing experience with untrained manpower accelerates decline. At first, Russian society was distant from the conflict. When wars stopped being about battles, at some point, wars stopped being decided only on the battlefield. They move into ministries, into intelligence services, into private conversations between elites. This is where Russia is now. The fighting in Ukraine continues, but the deeper consequences are unfolding elsewhere, inside Russia's political and power structure. And this is the phase that has historically proven most dangerous for long-standing leaders. The Kremlin's greatest fear: losing control of the story. Authoritarian systems depend on narrative control. For years, the Kremlin managed this carefully. Victories were amplified, losses were minimized, failures were blamed on outsiders. But Ukraine changed the information environment. The war could not be hidden. Videos circulated online. Families saw casualties firsthand. Soldiers spoke privately, and sometimes publicly. The gap between official statements and reality grew too large to ignore. And when people stop believing the story, they start questioning the system. One common misunderstanding is how regimes fall. Elites rarely overthrow leaders out of anger. They do it out of fear. Fear of being associated with failure. Fear of losing wealth. Fear of being the last to jump. Russia's elites are not emotional. They are pragmatic. And wars that go badly force calculations. Who will be blamed? Who will be protected? Who will survive politically? These questions are now being asked quietly, but constantly. In stable authoritarian systems, security services are unified. In unstable ones, they compete. Russia's war has increased pressure on military intelligence, internal security agencies, National Guard forces. Each institution wants to avoid responsibility for failure. Each wants to remain indispensable. This creates mistrust. And mistrust weakens coordination. When security institutions start watching each other instead of external threats, the system becomes fragile. One of the most alarming developments has been the rise of powerful private military formations. These groups recruit independently, operate with their own command structures, publicly criticize state leadership. This breaks a fundamental rule of authoritarian control. The state must always control organized violence. When it doesn't, power fragments. Public criticism by armed actors is not just noise. T is a signal that fear has limits. Many ask a simple question: why doesn't Putin just stop? The answer is strategic: confirm military failure, undermine deterrence, weaken Russia's global position. But continuing the war drains resources and morale. This is the classic trap of prolonged conflict. Victory is unreachable, defeat is unacceptable. So the war continues. By default, military collapse does not happen in isolation. It intersects with the economy. Sanctions restrict technology. Revenue becomes unpredictable. Military spending increases dramatically.